The year 1814 was a dramatic and pivotal time in the War of 1812. With the conflict now in its third year, the stakes had risen for both the United States and Britain. For the Americans, the war was a struggle to defend their sovereignty and prove their viability as a nation. For the British, it was an opportunity to reassert dominance over their former colony while navigating a world reshaped by the Napoleonic Wars. The events of 1814 demonstrated how fragile the United States' position was and how easily the war could reach American soil. Following Napoleon's defeat in Europe, Britain redirected its military focus and resources to North America, intensifying the pressure on American forces. This new strategy led to some of the most dramatic moments of the war, including the burning of Washington, D.C., and the subsequent defense of Baltimore. These events not only tested the resolve of the United States, but also became defining moments in the nation's history, leaving a lasting impact on American identity and patriotism. As the war approached its climactic stages, the courage of American defenders, the resilience of civilians, and determination to withstand British aggression would shape the outcome and legacy of the conflict. The British assault on Washington, D.C. in August 1814 was one of the most shocking events of the War of 1812. For the first time in American history, a foreign power targeted the capital of the young republic, delivering a symbolic and humiliating blow to its government. The attack was part of a broader British strategy that followed the defeat of Napoleon in Europe. With the Napoleonic Wars temporarily resolved, Britain was able to redirect its attention and resources to the war in North America. The British High Command sought to pressure the United States into negotiating peace by striking a political and economic centers. The British High Command sought to pressure the United States into negotiating peace by striking at its political and economic centers. Washington, D.C. was a logical target. Although not a significant military hub, the city was the seat of the American government and a potent symbol of the nation's independence. By capturing and burning the city, the British hoped to demoralize the United States and send a clear message about its vulnerability. The British campaign began with a landing at Benedict, Maryland on August 19, 1814. A force of approximately 4,500 British soldiers and Marines, commanded by Major General Robert Ross, began marching towards Washington. Their advance was swift and largely unopposed as American forces struggled to organize a proper defense. The American military response was led by Brigadier General William Winder, who hastily assembled a force of about 6,000 militia, regular troops, and sailors. However, the American defenders were inexperienced and poorly coordinated, a weakness that became evident at the Battle of Bladensburg on August 24th. The Battle of Bladensburg, fought just 6 miles from Washington, was a disaster for the Americans. The hastily assembled militia units broke ranks under the pressure of the disciplined British assault, leading to a chaotic retreat. The rout was so complete that the engagement became mockingly known as the Bladensburg Races. With the road to Washington wide open, the British entered the city later that evening. They encountered little resistance as most of the city's residents had fled in anticipation of their arrival. What followed was a calculated act of destruction designed to humiliate the American government. British forces set fire to key government buildings, including the White House, the Capitol, and the Treasury Department. The flames consumed much of the Capitol's infrastructure, leaving a charred and smoldering ruin. The destruction was thorough but targeted, sparing private homes and institutions like the Patent Office. One of the most enduring stories from the event is that of Dolley Madison, the First Lady, who famously saved a portrait of George Washington from the White House before fleeing the city. Her actions became a symbol of resilience in the face of devastation. The burning of Washington was a major embarrassment for the United States. It underscored the vulnerability of the young nation and highlighted the weaknesses in its military preparedness. However, it also galvanized public opinion and strengthened the resolve of Americans to continue the fight. For the British, the attack was a short-term success, but a strategic miscalculation. The destruction of Washington inflamed American anger and did little to bring the United States closer to peace negotiations. Instead, it rallied American forces and set the stage for the dramatic defense of Baltimore just weeks later. The events in Washington marked a low point in the war for the United States, but they also served as a catalyst for renewed determination. In the ashes of the Capitol, the spirit of the nation remained unbroken, ready to face the challenges that lay ahead. After their successful assault on Washington, D.C., the British turned their attention to Baltimore. Baltimore was a critical target due to its status as a major port, shipbuilding hub, and privateering center. American privateers operating from Baltimore had inflicted significant damage on British merchant shipping, making the city a prime target for retaliation. Unlike Washington, though, Baltimore was well prepared for an attack. Under the leadership of Major General Samuel Smith, the city's defenses were fortified and its citizens were mobilized. Trenches were dug, artillery positions established, and military units were ready to repel the British advance. The British launched the campaign against Baltimore on September 12, 1814, with a two-pronged assault. A land force of approximately 4,500 troops led by Major General Robert Ross aimed to capture the city, while a naval fleet under Vice Admiral Alexander Cochrane prepared to bombard Fort McHenry, which guarded the harbor. The campaign began with the Battle of North Point, a skirmish between British forces and American militia outside of the city. Despite being outmatched, the militia fought bravely and managed to delay the British advance. During the battle, General Ross was killed by a sharpshooter, a significant blow to British morale and leadership. The delay at North Point gave Baltimore's defenders crucial time to reinforce their positions. By the time the British reached the city's defenses, they faced a well-organized and heavily fortified resistance. Unable to breach the defenses, the British land forces withdrew. While the land assault faltered, the British Navy launched a massive bombardment of Fort Henry on September 13th and 14th. For 25 hours, British ships fired rockets and shells at the fort, attempting to break its defenses and open a path to Baltimore's harbor. The defenders of Fort McHenry, under the command of Major General Armistead, held firm despite the relentless attack. The fort's guns returned fire, and the British were unable to inflict significant damage or force a surrender. The sight of the American flag flying over Fort McHenry the morning after the bombardment became an iconic moment in U.S. history. Among those witnessing the battle from a battleship was Francis Scott Key, a lawyer and amateur poet. Inspired by the resilience of the defenders, Key penned a poem titled "The Defense of Fort McHenry." Key's poem, later set to music, became the Star-Spangled Banner, eventually adopted as the United States national anthem. The flag that flew over Fort McHenry, known as the Star-Spangled Banner, remains one of the most enduring symbols of American patriotism. The defense of Baltimore was a turning point in the war. It demonstrated that American forces could successfully repel British attacks and protect critical cities. The victory restored national pride after the humiliation of Washington burning and boosted morale across the country. For the British, the failure to capture Baltimore was a significant setback. The campaign had been intended as a show of force, but the inability to breach the city's defenses undermined their momentum and strategic goals in the Chesapeake region. The events at Fort McHenry also had a profound impact on the American public. The successful defense reinforced the idea that the United States could stand up to the might of the British Empire. It became a rallying point for national unity and resolve in the final stages of the war. Baltimore's citizens played a critical role in the city's defense. Their efforts to build fortifications and support the militia demonstrated the importance of civilian participation in the war effort. This collective resilience became a defining aspect of Baltimore's story during the conflict. The defense of Baltimore and Fort McHenry symbolized the enduring spirit of the United States. Despite facing overwhelming odds, the defenders held their ground, inspiring future generations to remember the sacrifices made during this pivotal moment of the War of 1812. The events of 1814, particularly the burning of Washington and the defense of Baltimore, had a profound impact on the civilian population of the United States. These moments highlighted both the vulnerabilities of the young nation and the resilience of its people in the face of adversity. In Washington, the British assault was a humiliating blow to American morale. Civilians in the capital fled in panic as British troops advanced, leaving their homes and possessions behind. The burning of iconic buildings like the White House and the Capitol was a shocking visual reminder of the war's stakes. The destruction left Washington in ruins, and for many Americans it symbolized the fragile state of the nation. However, the devastation also sparked anger and determination. Civilians across the country rallied to support the war effort, vowing to prevent a similar disaster in the future. The aftermath of the attack revealed the resilience of Washington residents. Those who returned worked tirelessly to rebuild their city, determined to restore the capital as a symbol of national pride. The rapid recovery efforts became a source of inspiration for the rest of the country. In Baltimore, the story was markedly different. Rather than fleeing in the face of British forces, the city's residents actively participated in its defense. Civilians from all walks of life worked together to construct fortifications, build trenches, and support the militia. This sense of unity and determination became a defining feature of Baltimore's response to the British assault. The successful defense of the city reinforced the idea that ordinary citizens could play a critical role in securing the nation's future. The resilience shown in Baltimore had a ripple effect across the country. It restored American confidence after the debacle in Washington and demonstrated that even in the face of overwhelming odds, the United States could stand firm against British aggression. The events of 1814 also reshaped public opinion about the war. Initially, many Americans had been ambivalent or even opposed to the conflict. However, the British attacks on Washington and Baltimore galvanized public support, creating a renewed sense of national unity and resolve. Civilians, whether fleeing destruction or aiding in defense, were deeply affected by the war's events. Their experiences helped shape the broader narrative of resilience and determination that defined the United States' efforts in the War of 1812. The events of 1812, including the burning of Washington and the defense of Baltimore, were not just domestic milestones, but they also had significant implications in the international arena. Britain's strategy in North America was deeply influenced by its global priorities, particularly its decades-long struggle against Napoleon in Europe. For much of the War of 1812, Britain's resources were stretched thin. The Napoleonic Wars consumed the majority of British manpower and funding, relegating the North American conflict to secondary theater. British commanders in Canada had to balance limited resources while defending their colonies and maintaining supply lines. The defeat and exile of Napoleon in 1814 marked a turning point. With the Napoleonic Wars seemingly resolved, Britain could focus more attention on the United States. This led to the campaigns in Washington and Baltimore, as well as a renewed naval blockade along the American coast. Despite these efforts, Britain's primary goal in North America was not conquest. Rather, British leaders sought to secure a favorable peace agreement that would protect their interests in Canada and the Atlantic. The burning of Washington was intended as a symbolic act to weaken American resolve and hasten negotiations. Internationally, the burning of Washington received mixed reactions. While some in Britain celebrated the display of dominance, others saw it as excessive and counterproductive. In Europe, where many nations weary of conflict, the events underscored the fragile state of peace even after Napoleon's defeat. Ultimately, Britain's focus shifted towards securing an end to the war that would stabilize its global standing. These events laid the groundwork for the Treaty of Ghent and the war's conclusion. The events of 1814, marked by the burning of Washington, the defense of Baltimore, and the bombardment of Fort McHenry, represented both darkest and most inspiring moments of the War of 1812. These moments shaped the war's legacy and left a lasting imprint on American identity. The burning of Washington was a humbling experience for the United States. It exposed the nation's vulnerabilities and underscored the challenges of defending a young republic. However, the rapid recovery and resolve to rebuild the capital became a testament to the resilience of its people. In contrast, the defense of Baltimore highlighted the strength of preparation, unity, and resolve. The victory at Fort McHenry not only protected a critical American city, but inspired Francis Scott Key's poem, which became a defining symbol of national pride. The Star-Spangled Banner would eventually be adopted by the U.S. as the national anthem, commemorating the endurance and courage of American defenders. The year 1814 solidified the United States' determination to preserve even against one of the world's most powerful empires. These moments laid the foundation for the war's conclusion and contributed to the emerging narrative of American resilience and unity.